What's up everybody on YouTube? AJ Rest back to discuss another video, and today we're going to be talking about the biggest takeaways from NFL Week 5. Yes sir, Week 5. This is really one of the best weeks of NFL football that we've seen in a while, certainly in the past few years, and it all kicked off between the matchup between the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Atlanta Falcons. Went wire to wire into overtime. Kirk Cousins had 509 passing yards. Drake London had a game as well. We're going to talk about that more in detail when we talk about that game. Then you fast forward to Sunday, the matchup between the Texans and the Bills, a reunion between Stephon Diggs and Josh Allen, a lot of drama there, and that game went to the wire. The matchup between the Cincinnati Bengals and the Baltimore Ravens, you can make the case that the Bengals should have won that game if not for a botched snap on the field goal, which then led to the Ravens getting possession, a huge run by Derrick Henry, and then Justin Tucker winning the game on a field goal. A huge divisional win there. I think the Ravens are getting back on track, but we'll talk about them soon. The Minnesota Vikings, they played great Sunday morning, at least Sunday morning in American time, but over there in London it was the afternoon. 5-0 still. I think it's really time to start taking them serious, buying stock in this team. Like I usually say, it's early, but this is week 5. I've said in previous videos, week 7, 8, 9, 10, that's when you're starting to see where teams truly are, and we're getting to that level, and the Vikings still are finding multiple ways to win. That's a good sign for them, but there's just a lot of games to talk about. The Dallas Cowboys getting a huge win in a 90-minute delay of a game. That was crazy, but it was worth the wait, and it wasn't a perfect game, but the Cowboys were able to find a way to win that game. So there's a lot to talk about, and there were so many great games, and I can't wait to analyze them and get perspective on them, and also see what y'all think in the comments after the video as well too. With that being said though, guys, before we talk about NFL Week 5, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe and turn on post notifications. You know we post about here videos about sports, lifestyle, pop culture, NBA, NFL, Marvel videos, shorts, cooking reels, things of that nature. With that being said, let's talk about NFL Week 5.
And they were playing that song about you swag and surf, and the whole stadium was moving. And I looked around, and this is pretty sweet.
Yes, sir, Ski. Now, this was really a good Thursday night football game. Usually the games in the past few years that take place on Thursday night, we know that they've been underwhelming, but this one went into overtime, and the Falcons beat the Buccaneers, winning 36-30. Really, the Buccaneers had most of the momentum for most of the game. Baker Mayfield, he had a really good game, completed 19 out of his 24 passing attempts, 180 passing yards, 3 touchdowns. Didn't have to do too much, but he was efficient. He's been efficient all of this year, and like I said in previous videos, I'm happy for Baker because he's went through a lot of adversity, and to play how he did last year, didn't get a contract in the offseason from the Buccaneers, it's well deserving. And their defense is one of the better defenses in the league too, but for me in this game, and obviously if you were watching, the momentum really swung, no pun intended, to the Atlanta Falcons when Jesse Bates punched the ball out of Bucky Irvin's hands, and the Falcons recovered it to set up Young Hoku to get a game-tying field goal to go into overtime. And that's really where things changed. The Falcons, I mean, they put up a great performance. I talked about it in the intro. Kirk Cousins went insane. I'm not gonna lie, the only thing I don't like is him throwing the ball for almost 60 times, but it ended up working. He completed 42 out of his 58 passing attempts, had 509 passing yards, 4 touchdowns and 1 interception. Most passing yards by a Falcons quarterback, past Matt Ryan's record on the night that they were honoring him. And the team just overall played great. Drake London had 12 receptions for 154 receiving yards and a touchdown. Of course, Kadero Hodge had that game-winning touchdown at the end in overtime. Shout out to him as well because he went to the same school as my parents, Prairie View A&M. Yes, sir, the Panthers. Darnell Mooney had 9 receptions for 105 receiving yards, 2 touchdowns, and Kyle Pitts had 7 receptions for 88 receiving yards. So really an electric game between 2 divisional opponents. Certainly will be competing for the top spot in the NFC South. For the Buccaneers, if you're a Bucs fan like my dad, I wouldn't panic. They definitely should have won the game, but it was a really good performance by both of these teams, and they'll be in the mix. The Minnesota Vikings continue to be undefeated as they won against the New York Jets early in London, winning the game 23-17. This team is for real, guys. We have to talk about them for sure. In the division with the Packers, with the Lions, even with the Bears, I think it's safe to say that the NFC North right now is the best division in the NFL, and it's not really even close, to be honest. Yes, you have the AFC North as well, which have the Baltimore Ravens, have the Bengals, who we still potentially view as a playoff contender, and the Steelers. The NFC North, it's real. Every team is over 500. Every team is playing well and humming, and the Vikings are playing the best ball in the NFL, especially defensively, but offensively as well. Forced Aaron Rodgers to throw 2 interceptions in the first quarter, 3 total, and he threw a pick 6 as well. Aaron Rodgers said that that was an uncharacteristic performance for him. Well, when teams play against the Vikings, they play uncharacteristic then, because this team has been playing great football. Andrew Van Ginkel, Stephon Gilmore, Cameron Bynum. There's so many good players defensively for the Vikings and offensively as well too. Of course, you have Justin Jefferson, who's arguably the best wide receiver in the game. Have Jordan Addison, Aaron Jones, he got hurt in the game, hoping that he's okay, but they still have a lot of good weapons. Ty Chandler. Just overall, this team is playing really good football and finding multiple ways to win, and that's a good sign if you're vying to be a Super Bowl contender for sure. Kevin O'Connell, I think by far he's the coach of the year so far, and he had a great coaching season in 2022 as well too, and last year really, because they still had an opportunity to make the playoffs but ultimately didn't. For the Jets, they are exactly who I thought they were. A lot of people were saying that they could potentially be Super Bowl contenders. I never really bought into that. A lot of people just thought that dropping Aaron Rodgers into that team with a solid defense and weapons all around, that they were going to be world beaters. I never thought that. I still think that the Buffalo Bills, who we'll talk about in a few, are the best team in that division, is going to win the division again, especially with Miami dealing with those injuries. And the Jets, I'm not crazy about. Yes, they could try to trade for Devontae Adams, but that doesn't fix all of their problems. They have a very stagnant offense. They aren't creative. They've struggled 2 games in a row to score points when their defense has played solid. It's just not a beautiful thing there. But for the Vikings, it is a beautiful thing. Sam Darnold is playing really good football. The team is playing great, and the Vikings are the best team in football. And I know that's a fact. Some of these games we're really going to run through, and I think it's really going to help with time-wise too, because some of these videos have been long from the recaps. But like I said, I don't like to coast through teams. I want to talk about them. But this matchup between the Bears and Panthers, 2 teams that have made trades with each other. Of course, with Carolina getting the first pick to draft Bryce Young in 2023, made that deal with the Bears, and it's not looking good for them at all. The Bears won this game 36-10. I will say though, the biggest takeaway from this game is the performance of Caleb Williams. By far had his best game of his career so far in his rookie year. He completed 20 out of his 29 passing attempts at 304 passing yards and 2 touchdowns. A really good game. DJ Moore had 5 receptions for 105 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns. DeAndre Swift had 73 rushing yards on 21 carries and a touchdown. The team had a really good game overall, and like I said about the NFC North, even the Bears too, they're 3-2 right now. That division is nice. Bears, their defense is really good too. We've known that for a while. If there's anything about Matt Eberflus, he's been able to coach up a good defense there, so that's for sure a good sign if you're a Bears fan. For the Panthers, we don't need to talk about nothing, but there is one takeaway for sure that I will say. They're easily the worst franchise in professional football, and that's not necessarily even the coaching I'm talking about. It's how the organization is ran. Here's another game that took place with a dominant rookie who's been easily the offensive rookie of the year so far up to week 5, and Jaden Daniels and the Washington Commanders, and they dominated the Cleveland Browns, winning 34-13. The Commanders are now 4-1 atop of the NFC East. As a Cowboys fan, I'm annoyed by that, but I'm not scared, but we're not going to talk about that right now. Jaden Daniels continues to play really well, completed 14 out of 25 passing attempts at 238 passing yards, 1 touchdown and an interception, and he also ran for 82 yards on 11 carries. Terry McLaurin with 112 receiving yards on 4 receptions. The team overall just plays really good football, defensively too. So it's really exciting if you're a Commanders fan, if you're a Washington fan in general, because they've been able to turn things around, finally finding their guy at quarterback who's not only dynamic as a dual threat quarterback, being able to extend plays and scramble at a high level, but also Jaden Daniels is an incredible passer, and he's able to make precise and accurate throws, so that's a good sign for Washington. But for the Browns, I think it's time to say it. The Browns trade with the Houston Texans is going to go down as the worst in NFL history. The guarantee money that he is getting is not worth the performance that he is putting out, and the only reason why Deshaun Watson isn't being benched right now is literally because of the contract. It's bad. I hate it for him, but we have to call things how it is. He's just playing bad football, and the team, of course, we can talk about the offensive line not being great, dealing with injuries, things to that nature, but when you have a defense like that, it feels like it's just getting wasted. It seems like there's no belief from his teammates in him as well. It's just a really sucky situation, and they have a good coach in Kevin Stefanski too, and a good defensive coordinator. It just sucks right now if you're a Browns fan, but for the Commanders, it's a good dub, and they're looking up for sure. This game is really going to be brief between the Miami Dolphins and the New England Patriots. Not really too much to talk about here. It's a good win for the Dolphins, who have been struggling, of course, in the absence of Tua Tagovailoa, waiting to see when he'll potentially come back, because their season will continue to slip away if they have people like, no disrespect, Tyler Huntley playing at quarterback. He didn't have a terrible game. He completed 18 out of his 31 passing attempts, had 194 passing yards and an interception, but this current Dolphins team is not scary at all. They're 2-3 now. Hopefully they can pull off a couple more wins in the absence of Tua, but I don't know. Tyreek Hill isn't even putting up Tyreek Hill stats, but of course, because he doesn't have his franchise guy and quarterback to throw him the ball, so he can't throw himself the ball. Only had 6 receptions for 69 yards. New England Patriots wise, I'm sorry if you're Patriots fans, but I really don't have much to say about you. Every single week it's the same with the Patriots. They play conservative football. Their defense is good under Gerard Mayo, but it's not enough. Ultimately, you're going to end up starting Drake May sometime at the end of the season. He's your franchise guy, but this year is just a developmental season for them, and I'm not surprised they still found a way to lose a game, even though Tyler Huntley was starting for the Miami Dolphins. Wow, the Jaguars finally got their first win. That's a good sign for sure. This is a really good game between the Indianapolis Colts and the Jaguars, and I'll give you an interesting stat. The Indianapolis Colts haven't won a game in Jacksonville in 11 years. I don't know exactly what to take from that. That is a crazy stat. I think one thing, if you're a Colts fan, is that you didn't want to be the team that lost to the Jacksonville Jaguars and gave them the first win, but it ended up happening. But I will say though, offensively they played really good, and Joe freaking Flacco, guys, we have to put respect on his name. I'm sure Cleveland wishes that they would have at least brought him back to be a backup, because how Deshaun Watson is playing, like I talked about earlier, it's pretty horrid. But Joe Flacco, at 39 years old, completed 33 out of his 44 passing attempts, had 359 passing yards and 3 touchdowns, playing really good football in the absence of Anthony Richardson, who was of course injured in that game against the Steelers, but he'll be coming back soon eventually. But there's a lot of teams that wish they could have a quarterback like Joe Flacco, even despite his age, who's playing at a really good level. Alec Pierce so far, he has been the best wide receiver on this team. I know they have Michael Pittman Jr., but Alec Pierce, 3 receptions for 134 receiving yards and a touchdown, playing really good football. But they did play also without their star running back in Jonathan Taylor, and that's a huge part of your offense, and I think that was one reason why they weren't able to get the win ultimately. Trevor Lawrence finally was able to get things clicking with his team. He completed 28 out of his 34 passing attempts for the Jaguars, had 371 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, and 1 interception. The biggest takeaway for the Jaguars, though, besides getting their first win, is Tank Bigsby. He had a great game. 13 carries for 101 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns. He was hooping for sure. I know Travis Etienne Jr. has been dealing with some lingering injuries, but Tank Bigsby, he is for sure making the case to be running back number 1 down there in Jacksonville, but only time will tell. Rookie Brian Thomas Jr. went crazy, 5 receptions for 122 receiving yards and a touchdown. Christian Kirk had 4 receptions for 88 receiving yards. That was finally the Jacksonville Jaguars team that we thought that we would see. A little delayed, and we'll see how the season goes, but it's a good win for them, I would say for sure. This game between the Houston Texans and the Buffalo Bills was really good. A game actually that I was at working the event, doing some production and audio stuff. Had to leave a little bit earlier for my ESPN radio job, but it was a really good game. The Texans won 23-20. The reunion between Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs, all the drama there. But I will say the Texans, they were up 20-3 at one point, and they kind of took their foot off the gas a little bit. They were playing great in the first half, but in the third quarter, the Bills and Josh Allen, they were able to start to get things going. That huge 49-yard reception to Keon Coleman on that 4th down was a big play, an explosive play that really swung the momentum in the game to the Bills' favor. Ultimately, it was not a good performance at all for Josh Allen in the game. Completed 9 out of his 30 passing attempts, had 131 passing yards and a touchdown. That is not an MVP stellar performance at all. James Cook had 82 rushing yards and a touchdown on 20 carries, but I'm not necessarily going to get too into stats with them because this is 2 weeks in a row where you've had lackluster performances. Of course, this is a more respectable performance that you put against the Texans, because against the Baltimore Ravens in week 4 on Sunday Night Football, you got blew out for sure. But the Baltimore Ravens and the Houston Texans, those are 2 teams that we are potentially naming as AFC championship contenders or even Super Bowl contenders, and to lay an egg against the Baltimore Ravens and to not play too bad, you had an opportunity to win the game if you were the Buffalo Bills, but at the end had poor clock management, just throwing the ball and really just giving the football right back to the Texans to give them the opportunity to kick a game-winning field goal, which they didn't win the game. That was bad management there. But for the Houston Texans, it's a good win. Like I said, this team hasn't even played their best football yet, and they're 4-1. In previous games, they've had problems with penalties, and that started to array a little bit in the third quarter, but they were able to tame that. And Nico Collins hurting his hamstring in the second quarter and not returning, that's a little concerning, but I think that he'll be fine. But this team has a ton of weapons, man. Nico Collins, Stephon Diggs, Tank Dell, Joe Mixon when he returns, Dalton Schultz. People don't talk about Xavier Hutchinson enough, in my opinion. They just have a lot of weapons, and this team, they have a ton of potential. I think that they're really gonna make some noise. CJ Stroud, of course, goes without saying. He had a couple of turnovers in the second half, but they were able to get things going, like I said, and they made the big plays when it mattered most. He completed 28 out of his 38 passing attempts, had 331 passing yards, 1 touchdown and 1 interception. Cam Akers, he's been solid, had 42 rushing yards and a touchdown, kind of holding it down while Joe Mixon is out, and the same with Ogunbowale. The team is playing really good, and I'm not a Texans fan at all. Y'all know my favorite team is Dallas, but it's a lot of respect because being from the Houston area and just seeing how the team plays, it was loud at the NRG Stadium as well too. It's a really good thing to see, and I'm glad for Houston because they were in purgatory for many years. And for the Bills, like I said earlier, I think that they'll still win their division, but they definitely need to get things going and acclimate themselves, because I think this is the part where they are starting to see true adversity hit. This game was an electrifying performance between 2 AFC divisional rivals in the Baltimore Ravens and the Cincinnati Bengals, and the Baltimore Ravens prevailed, winning the game 41-38, and the Bengals certainly had their opportunities to win the game. Lamar Jackson fumbled the ball in overtime, set the Bengals up perfectly to make a game-winning field goal. I will say though, offensively, they could have been more aggressive trying to set up an easier field goal for McPherson, but it also wasn't McPherson's fault that they missed too. It was a bad exchange from the hold, and he missed a field goal, and then on the next play, the Baltimore Ravens rushed down. Derrick Henry had a huge gain to get into the Bengals territory, and the Ravens were able to win a game-winning field goal on a Justin Tucker field goal, improving their record to 3-2. They've won 3 games in a row now, starting to look like the Baltimore Ravens that we thought they would be before the year, one of the best teams in the AFC. And Lamar Jackson had a great game, completed 26 out of his 42 passing attempts, had 348 passing yards and 4 touchdowns. Derrick Henry also had 15 carries for 92 rushing yards and a touchdown. And then Zay Flowers had a great game, had 7 receptions for 111 receiving yards. Baltimore is starting to look like Baltimore that we know and love, but their defense has been concerning, because when I read to you these stats, Joe Burrow had a field day, completed 30 out of his 39 passing attempts, had 392 passing yards, 5 touchdowns and an interception. We all know that Lamar Jackson and Joe Burrow, they're 2 of the top 5 quarterbacks in the league, so you can kind of give some slack there to the Ravens defense, but this isn't the first time that we've seen them give up a handful of points to other teams this season so far, so definitely have to monitor that. Jamar Chase though, he had a huge game, had 10 receptions for 193 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns, absolutely feasted on the Ravens secondary went crazy. T. Higgins also had 9 receptions for 83 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns. That was a really good game. These teams, they're really competitive, but the Bengals are 1-4 now, and we have to stop talking about these slow starts. You shouldn't start out slow, and your record is who you are right now. Yes, it's still early, you can get things going, but this is the National Football League. It's hard to win, and you can't take games for granted. You can't have Super Bowl expectations, championship contender expectations, and continue to play lackluster football defensively, especially for the Bengals. But for the Ravens, it's a good win, and they're starting to get into form. This was a really good win for the Denver Broncos. After beating teams like the Jets in week 4 and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers prior to that, they were able to get their 3rd win against the Las Vegas Raiders in the same division, winning 34-18. I know we saw that little exchange between Bo Nix and Sean Payton, but Bo Nix, he's played some really good football as a rookie this year. Of course, he is 24 years old, little older as a rookie, but he's played great football. Completed 19 out of his 27 attempts in this game, had 206 passing yards and 2 touchdowns. The Bengals, they look good, and their defense has been a testament as well too. Pat Surtain, arguably in my opinion for sure, the best corner in the league, had 2 interceptions in this game, returned 1 for a 100-yard return on a touchdown. They just look really good right now. Obviously, the Chiefs are the best team in the AFC West, and I think that the Chargers potentially, they could be the 2nd best team, but Broncos will have something to say about that. The Broncos, they look really good, and I'm glad for Bo Nix because a lot of people talked about him starting for forever in college, playing the most college games as a quarterback, but his experience shows true. Him and Jaden Daniels, they've been playing really good football as rookies so far, and they played the most in college football, so that's not necessarily a coincidence in my opinion. The team is playing well under Sean Payton. For the Las Vegas Raiders, not too much to be said there. I think Antonio Pierce is a good coach, but we know there's no question that they wanted to get Jaden Daniels in the draft in 2024, but they weren't able to trade up for him, and ultimately that's why you're seeing Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell play in this game, because there's not been great quarterback play there. They're going to end up trading Devontae Adams, a tough thing there. This team is going to be rebuilding for a few years, and there was a video with Mark Davis, the Las Vegas Raiders owner, talking to Shadir Sanders this past weekend.
I watch all your games. Who knows? You may be home right now.
So we'll see, because they'll definitely be drafting a quarterback soon in the 2025 draft. But for the Broncos, it was a good dub. Man, if you're a 49ers fan, refrain your ears, your eyes, everything, because the Arizona Cardinals came back on the 49ers, winning this game 24-23 in a game that the 49ers were up 23-10. And we saw Kyler Murray absolutely go off. Rushing specifically, but also passing wise, of course. Passing wise, he completed 19 out of his 30 passing attempts, had 195 passing yards, a touchdown, and interception. Rushing wise, he had that huge rushing touchdown, had 7 carries for 83 rushing yards and a touchdown. James Conner had a solid game, had 86 rushing yards on 19 carries. Marvin Harrison Jr. had a huge catch later in the game to help steal things. They just played really good football. And the Cardinals, even though they're 2-3, like I said about them last year, they were really competitive, and they've been competitive this year. And I'm not sure that they'll be a playoff team this year. I think that they will probably win 7, 8, or 9 games, but next year in 2025, I think buckle up, because we could be seeing a potential 10-11 win team in that division that of course is tough. But a team like the 49ers and the Seahawks, specifically the 49ers though, we don't know if their team will be exactly the same in 2025. It could open an opportunity for the Cardinals. The same thing with the Rams too. There's question marks there. But for the 49ers, they're hit with the injury bug right now for sure. A lot of people keep saying that the 49ers, they'll be fine. And it's okay to have that perspective. I mean, you still have Deebo Samuel, George Kittle playing, but Christian McCaffrey, he is the heartbeat to that team. If he is not playing, this team, in my opinion, is not a Super Bowl contender. It's that simple. I know that they contended for a Super Bowl without him in 2019-20 season, and they made the NFC Championship game in the 2021 season, but Christian McCaffrey makes this team more devastating. And him still not playing, him still being on IR and things of that nature, him potentially not starting until later in the season, we don't even know how he'll look. So for me, the 49ers, they're a 2-3 football team right now. They are who they are. They still have a lot of talent, a lot of weapons offensively and defensively. And I will say Jordan Mason, he's played good in the running back position so far this year in the absence of Christian McCaffrey, but it's not the same. Brock Purdy, he is still a really good quarterback in this league. I don't think that it's his fault at all that they're playing this way. He did have 2 interceptions in this game, had 244 passing yards, completed 19 out of his 35 passing attempts. But this team, they're just going to have to get things right for sure. And as a Cowboys fan, I don't mind how they're playing, I'm not going to lie. But objectively and as an analyst, I do think that they'll still make the playoffs, but I'm not sure that they'll win the division. The Seahawks, right now, they're 3-2. They haven't looked too impressive in these past 2 weeks, but they did in the first 3 weeks, so we'll see how things go there. And they play each other this upcoming Thursday night for week 6, so we'll see how that goes, because there's a lot of implications there. But for the 49ers, they got to get things right, but it's a good win for the Cardinals. Now, speaking of the Seahawks, they lost the game to the New York Giants at home, losing 29-20. The Giants, they had a really impressive performance. First, I want to talk about Daniel Jones. I know they lost against the Cowboys, but he had a good game even in that performance too. They weren't able to score a touchdown, but in this game, they definitely did. He completed 23 out of his 34 passing attempts, had 257 passing yards and 2 touchdowns. They didn't even have their best receiver in rookie star wideout Malik Neighbors, and they still hooped in this game. Darius Slayton, 8 receptions for 122 receiving yards and a touchdown. A great game for sure from him. Tyrone Tracy Jr. had 18 carries for 129 rushing yards. No touchdowns, but that made a huge difference because that running game was able to of open things up for Daniel Jones in the passing game as well too. And really it came down, in my opinion, to that play on special teams at the end, that blocked field goal being returned for a touchdown, because it felt like the Seahawks were going to come back and ultimately win the game, them being the better team. But these past 2 weeks, they've been tough. They did have opportunity to win and beat the Lions, but the Lions won and they are the better team there. But this is a game potentially that you'll look in the NFC playoff picture in the future. And even if the Seahawks were to win the NFC West, which I'm still not 100% sure about, seeding wise, it could hurt losing this game to the Giants, because it will be like, man, we could have won that one. That could be an extra win. But you have to give credit to the Giants. I mean, they played a really good game. Brian Daboll, he's still a really good coach, but ultimately you can't play on the field as a coach. You have to steer your players into the right way, give them the best opportunity to win, and ultimately they're the players that play on the field, so they have to determine that. But the Giants, they looked really good in this game and got a dub. The Seahawks, like I said about them playing against the 49ers in week 6 on Thursday Night Football, they need to get that win. I think that they'll still be a playoff contender potentially, but it's not a good loss at all, especially if you lose into the Giants for sure. Here's a team in the NFC North that got a really good win. The Green Bay Packers beating the Los Angeles Rams 24-19 in a game where Jordan Love is still trying to get his groove back. He had a bad pick 6 in his end zone. That did not look good at all. They were able to get things going and won the game. He completed 15 out of his 26 passing attempts, had 224 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, and that 1 interception that I mentioned. But the team played really good. I think one takeaway if you're a Packers fan is Tucker Kraft. A lot of people like Luke Musgraves for sure, and rightfully so, but Tucker Kraft, he's looked really good as their tight end, and I think that he should be tight end number 1 for Green Bay going forward. Had 4 receptions on 88 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns. Josh Jacobs also had a rushing yards. Huge for me on fantasy, yes sir. But the team, they still look good in that NFC North, but like I said, the Vikings, they're the best team in the league right now, and I would still even have the Lions over the Packers right now too, but it's still early. That's the fortunate thing. Jordan Love can continue to get things right after missing those games due to that knee injury, trying to get things right, and their defense is still solid too, so that's a good thing for them, because they were also able to force Matthew Stafford to an interception. And talking about the Los Angeles Rams, man, it really feels like 2022 all over again. Puka Nacua being out, Cooper Kupp being out, that's 2 of your best wide receivers, a decimated offensive line, and you have Matthew Stafford, who's for sure still one of the best quarterbacks in the league, but you take out so much, man, it's just like a huge detriment to the team, and it's looking like low-key how it did in the Lions days. You still have Sean McVay being one of the best coaches in the league. Of course, you can only coach so much when you're missing so much of your personnel, so you don't want to make excuses, but it is what it is. I will say though, Kyron Williams had a really good game, had 22 carries on 102 rushing yards and a touchdown. Tutu Atwell has been their number 1 receiver in the absence of Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp, but he didn't really have a crazy game, only had 58 receiving yards, but Jordan Whittington, he had 7 receptions, 89 receiving yards, so that was a good showing from him, and Demarcus Robinson had a receiving touchdown. But it's a good win for the Packers. Like I said, it feels like 2022 for the Rams right now. Yes, you won the Super Bowl in the 2021-22 season. You had a lackluster 2022 year. Last year you made the playoffs, so that was a solid sign, but right now it's looking more reminiscent of 2022. Now right here, this is a game that I've been waiting to talk about. Maybe it's because I'm a Cowboys fan, which I will talk about objectively and a little subjectively, but mostly objectively as an analyst, sports analyst, gotta be that way. But it was a good win for the Cowboys in terms of how they were able to close out the game. If you're a Cowboys fan, that defense, they finally were able to put up a good performance as they did against the Giants, but like I said, the Giants aren't that crazy. But this Steelers team has been respected for sure. We know their identity being a physical football team, running the football. They were able to stop the run. Najee Harris only had 42 yards on 14 carries. Justin Fields only had 27 rushing yards on 6 carries. They weren't able to really create much of a running game, and the Cowboys defense, they made things easier for the offense, but I will say the offense made it harder for the defense in terms of Dallas. Dak having 3 turnovers, that first fumble, then 2 interceptions. It was tough, but he did make up for it in the last drive. And statistics wise, he had a good game besides the interceptions, threw for 352 passing yards, had 2 touchdowns, completed 29 out of his 42 passing attempts. That was a good game. If there's anything from a Cowboys perspective in terms of the running game, you were pleased with the performance from Rico Dowdle. Had 20 carries on 87 rushing yards, and also receiving wise, he had 2 receptions for 27 receiving yards and a touchdown. But the huge thing came from Jalen Tolbert. That last 4th down in the 4th quarter, gotta have it play. Jalen Tolbert came in getting that reception. He had 7 receptions for 87 yards and that touchdown to win the game. As a Cowboys fan, I'm gonna talk about it a little bit. I'm happy for sure that they were able to beat the Steelers. Of course, there's nothing personal. This is football, but as a fan, the Steelers are one of the teams I hate the most. And we'll talk about the teams that I don't like actually as a fan, but of course, objectively, there's no hate. You know, it's football, it's all love. But they're one of the teams that, of course, the Cowboys have been biggest rivals to throughout their history. Super Bowls in the 70s, in the 90s, things of that nature. And man, they had to have this win, because I know a lot of Steelers fans too. That would have been annoying for them to lose that game, but that was a good win for the Cowboys. Beat them in Pittsburgh this year, also beat them in Dak and Zeke's rookie year in a walk-off rushing touchdown that Zeke had back then. That was pleasing to see as a Cowboys fan, but objectively though, it's a good win for them. For the Steelers, you're 3-2 right now. Everyone knew that the Steelers, they don't have a dominant offense. That's no surprise. Yes, their defense is their identity. TJ Watt having a really good game in this game, but ultimately they weren't able to stop the plays at the passing game in the fourth quarter, which set up the Cowboys to win the game. That's a backbreaking thing if you're a Steelers fan, but I still don't think it's time to panic. But I will say, how satisfied are you with having a competitive team every single year? Yes, we know that Mike Tomlin is one of the best coaches in the league, hasn't had a losing season at all in his coaching career, but how satisfied are you with being competitive, making it to the playoffs in the first round and then losing? Because don't you get tired of that? As a Cowboys fan, I for sure get tired of that. And I know the Steelers, they've won a Super Bowl more recently, of course, than the Cowboys, but that's just going in circles and circles. So that's a conversation to be had. But as a Cowboys fan, I'm gonna put this graphic on the screen from Get Up. Y'all keep hating for sure. I'm definitely not saying the Cowboys are Super Bowl contenders at all. They're dealing with a ton of injuries right now and things of that nature. I'm not expecting too much. I never know what to expect because it's always a roller coaster being a Cowboys fan watching these games. But I will say, I keep hating. Y'all love to hate the Cowboys. It is what it is. But I'm back to being a journalist right now. It's a really good win for the Cowboys, and for the Steelers, y'all will still be good, man. So it's gonna work out fine. The last game that we have to talk about, of course, is the matchup on Monday night between the Kansas City Chiefs and the New Orleans Saints, and the Chiefs were able to win 26-13 in the first half. And certainly when Saunders got that interception in the end zone, that was nice. Big man balling for sure. That was really cool to see. It felt like the Saints were having momentum, but ultimately the Chiefs defense were able to lock up. Offensively, they were able to do enough to win the game. Stat wise, Patrick Mahomes, he completed 28 out of his 39 passing attempts at 331 passing yards, no touchdowns and 1 interception. But I've said this in previous weeks, the Chiefs haven't looked great, but they're still undefeated, just like the Minnesota Vikings. They're 5-0. And really the Texans and the Chiefs, they're similar in the fact that they haven't played their best football yet, or even remotely close, and they still have a great record. So I certainly think that the Chiefs, the Texans, how the Ravens are playing right now, those are some of the upper echelon teams in the AFC, but only time will tell because this is just the end of week 5 and we still have a long time to go in the season. And for the Saints, Derek Carr went out the game with an oblique injury, hoping that he's okay. And if you're a Saints fan, certainly hoping that he won't miss too much time because they're still trying to get Devontae Adams as well, just like the Jets are. So that's a conversation to for sure be had there, but I'm not surprised in the outcome of this game for the Chiefs. Kareem Hunt had a crazy good game, had 27 carries on 102 rushing yards and a touchdown. Juju Smith-Schuster had the most receiving yards in the game since the 2020-21 season, having 7 receptions for 130 receiving yards. Someone had to step up in the Rashee Rice absence, and it's looking like that he might be out the entire season. That sucks, but at least he didn't have an ACL tear. Travis Kelce had 9 receptions for 70 yards. So overall, a solid performance from the Chiefs. Not surprised that they won the game. And for the Saints, they've lost 3 games in a row now. Are they coming back down to life? We will see, but there's a lot of season to go left. So before closing out this video, I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about the Robert Saleh firing in New York for the Jets. I can understand it, but not in the middle of the season. Like, I'm not surprised that it happened. If it would have happened after the 2024 season, okay. But after week 5, and they're playing against the Buffalo Bills next Monday night in week 6 for an opportunity to be number 1 in the AFC East, I don't think it's a good decision. I think it's very premature by the Jets front office, but we'll see how it goes. Jeff Ulbrich, defensive coordinator for the Jets, he'll be the interim head coach. So we'll see how things go there. Like I talked about the Saints a second ago, they're in the Devontae Adams sweepstakes to try to get more explosive offensive plays for them because their defense has been sound all year. But I don't know. I mean, for me, like I said earlier in the video when I was talking about the Jets game against the Vikings, I never saw this team as a Super Bowl contender. I saw them as a wild card potentially in the AFC, and they still could be that, but I still think the Bills are better than them. So I don't know. I mean, it was very rash of people to think that you could just drop in a 40-year-old quarterback, almost 41 years old in December, in New York and just think that they were going to be automatic Super Bowl contenders. So that's just my perspective on it. Robert Saleh, he was a solid coach. He never got to see the true potential of this team with Aaron Rodgers at the helm for an entire season. But yeah, it is what it is. The NFL is a business, so that's my perspective on it. But let me know some of your biggest takeaways from NFL Week 5 and some of your predictions going into Week 6 and beyond. I appreciate you guys watching. Always make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and turn on post notifications. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter at SwaggyRuss, and also on TikTok at SwaggyRuss02 for cooking videos, shorts, reels, more content, things of that nature. More videos are on the way. God loves you. You are blessed. You are loved. Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. Y'all have a good one. Know that you matter and you have purpose, and y'all be blessed.